Hello, I'm Paul Ndiho. Happy New Year to you all, and welcome to Shaka Extra Time, a show that comes to you every week. Joining me from his home in Arlington, Virginia is Shaka Sally, aka the Kabale Kid. Hello, Shaka, and Happy New Year to you.
Hello, Ndugu Paul, and of course, a hugely happy New Year to you, and I certainly wish you and the audience a hugely prosperous 2021.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much, Shaka. Your fans missed you. We are glad to see you back. How was your vacation?
I missed them too, Ndugu Paul, and I think it was good really to go for some brief vacation, especially considering the environment that has really been dominated by the COVID-19. The environment is not particularly friendly. When you look at the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., a city that is known to be perhaps the de facto political capital of the world, you can't believe that it simply looks like a ghost town.
You are right about that. I guess the year ended off on a good note, though. We have vaccines, especially here in North America, in Europe. We've seen these vaccines being distributed, people being vaccinated. So I think there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I think you are right, Ndugu Paul. There could, in fact, be a light at the end of the tunnel, even though some would probably argue that we still remain in the tunnel. And I'm talking about globally, because this is a disease, a virus, that, by the way, does not require an immigration visa. It is a disease that, in fact, at the moment as we talk, has almost a say in everything you think about. And so, yes, you could actually have vaccines in North America. You could have vaccines in Europe. You could have vaccines in Asia. If you don't have vaccines all over the world, you still have a huge problem. Because the last time I checked, this is a virus, again, which has absolutely no respect for borders or boundaries.
Shaka, you make a very good point. There are people out there, or schools of thought, who say that large parts of Africa may not get COVID-19 vaccines for several months, or in some places, years. It might take years for this vaccine to reach there. Your thoughts on that?
That will be very, very unfortunate because, again, when we look at this coronavirus pandemic, we should look at it as indeed a pandemic, a disease that not only affects people regionally, but in fact affects all of us on this planet Earth. And so if we actually come up with a weapon that we could in fact use to neutralize the disease or to essentially wipe it out, we need to be very, very socially, culturally, and politically generous to such an extent that if we don't hold each other's backs, if we don't make sure that everybody has unfettered access to the tool, and I'm talking about the vaccine, then we are not sincerely solving anything. And so it should be up to us, at least those who have the advantage of living in a place that has been able to come up with some of these most important weapons, to avail that vaccine to everybody. We should be inclusive. Remember, I am not a very, very religious person. But what I can say is that there is a line that says, whoever much is given, more is expected. And I think that, yes, we should in fact extend our congratulations to the scientists and researchers, especially in the United States and the United Kingdom. The United States first came up with two of the vaccines. One was by Pfizer company and Biotech of Germany. Another is the Moderna. And then, of course, more recently, AstraZeneca, which, by the way, may in fact be the solution that a lot of less developed countries are looking for, because it does not require sophisticated means of storage. It is relatively cheaper, and is something that is ready to go almost anywhere, anytime. So I think we really should congratulate those scientists for a great job well done. And we hope that when it comes to the issue of distribution, we hope that that distribution will also end up being equitable so that it becomes inclusive. Because as I said a little bit earlier, we are talking about a disease here which has absolutely no respect for borders or boundaries, a disease which does not require any immigration formalities nor visas. It is a disease that can hit you anytime, anywhere on this part of the planet Earth.
You made a greater point about some of the vaccines, especially AstraZeneca. Most of the trials were done in Africa, so that's an indication that it might actually do very, very well in Africa.
Actually, you raise a very interesting point. The trials were, in fact, done globally. They made sure that every segment of society was involved in that particular trials, so that at the end of the day, then no one, in fact, is left out. But even the trials, in fact, in the United States also seem to be very, very inclusive.
What do you make of this argument a lot of people have made, saying that when you look at the mortality rates here in the Western world, you look at the mortality rates in Africa, the difference is night and day. Some people have argued that because Africa has a younger population, uh, generally speaking, maybe about 80% of the people on the continent are young people, maybe 35 and below. That's why we don't see a lot of numbers in terms of death as compared to the Western world, where we've seen a lot of people who have died as a result of COVID-19 were in their evening years or in their early 70s or 70s and above.
That could be true, Ndugu Paul. And one could also add perhaps that when you talk about infectious diseases, they usually tend to be environmental, the diseases and all that kind of stuff. When you look at the Western world, this is part of a planet where those types of diseases were long ago conquered. They are not the types of people that affect people so much in this part of the world. But when you come to the developing world and you're talking about Africa, there are lots of infectious diseases that always make rounds around the environment. We're talking about malaria. We're talking about tuberculosis. We're talking about more recently Ebola. These are diseases that have hit us so bad back at home. And probably because of interacting with those types of diseases, there is a possibility of essentially getting used with those types of diseases or aspects of those diseases to the extent that it makes your immunity a little bit stronger. So there could, in fact, be a situation where you could talk about a lot of people a lot of people in Africa, in addition to being young, probably have a very relatively stronger immunity. They probably have developed the HERD, which is spelled as HERD, the one that some people have been talking about here and has actually caused a lot of scientific and political controversy.
You mean the herd immunity?
That is correct. That is correct. And the other thing, Ndugu Paul, also is that when it comes to technology and the infrastructure, I think we have to accept the fact that for the most part, really, you're talking about an area in the world that is very, very much challenged in terms of infrastructure. So it's quite possible that when you look even at the reporting of the different countries, it's quite possible that those reports are not necessarily accurate. But it's good that this time around, at least Africa came up with the Africa CDC, the African Center for Disease Control, based in Addis Ababa, the de facto capital of Africa. Even though most Africans, if you want to go to Ethiopia, you are required to get a visa. Can you imagine
I guess
that?
it's the de facto capital on paper.
I mean, going to your capital, can you imagine if you were in Uganda to go to Kampala? You need a visa.
As I was doing research for this show, I came across some very interesting information. There was an
Mm.
article that I read that suggested that uh, it's normal for many Africans, especially older people, to move back to rural villages or their places of birth once they retire from former employment, and they leave the urban centers. And one of the writers argues that perhaps that could have also contributed to the low numbers that we see in Africa, as opposed to here in the Western world, where older people tend to move to the cities. They abandon their suburban homes and move to the cities because they want access to easy transportation, access to these amenities that are available for older people in the cities, like nursing homes and stuff like that.
Yeah, those researchers could actually have something very important to say. And when you think about it, also, is that when you go to the rural areas, or what we call the villages, you have a whole neighborhood up to yourself. You have a lot of space. You don't risk the possibility of running into crowds. And you know the disease, the coronavirus disease, enjoys very, very much uh, to somehow be found among crowds. And so you probably avoid a lot of things.
African countries started trading under the new continental wide free trade area at the beginning of the year, despite months of delays caused by the global coronavirus pandemic. Some experts have said that, for example, the launch itself is largely symbolic because when it comes to implementation of this trade agreement, that's where uh, the meat is. It's going to take time for things to get done. Your thoughts, Shaka?
I think, first of all, we should welcome that process because I think it begins to provide us at least with some solutions if we are seriously going to develop the mother African continent. I think it is a very good idea to come up with that sort of uh, continental trade bloc, which will eventually allow, hopefully, free movement of goods and services and through movement of people to interact, so that the ideas can also essentially interact and crisscross. Mind you, there is absolutely no reason why a continent that is arguably the most blessed with wealth on this planet Earth, the richest perhaps, why people on the continent should be ranked among the poorest, if not the poorest. I think it is high time that we get a new leadership, a leadership with new ideas, a leadership that is more innovative, a leadership that is more creative and more imaginative, that can begin to make things happen. And that is going to happen. But in order for that, in fact, to happen, so that most people on the African continent could actually benefit out of their God-given wealth, we need to go back to the great dreams of some of the founding fathers, like the Ghanaian founding president, the Osajefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, with his colleagues, who saw in their vision the answer of the development of Africa in the unity of the African continent. Kwame Nkrumah thought about Africa becoming a sort of United States of Africa. And for that, he in fact offered a solution. He offered Ghana, when it became independent from its slave name of the Gold Coast on March 6, 1957, he challenged the Ghanaian people and said the independence of Ghana would be meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of the entire African continent, and offered Ghana to be a nucleus for the future United States of Africa. That, of course, never happened, because there were a lot of doubting Thomases, and there were a lot of external influences which did not see African unity as being to their advantage. And so they worked very, very, very hard to make sure that that didn't happen. That is why in 1963, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, was in fact put in place, which later has now become the African Union. You're talking about an organization that has teeth, but certainly not the teeth that can bite. What Africa needs is African unity. What Africa needs is to become one country, is to remove these superficial boundaries which were imposed upon Africa by the Europeans during the 1884 Berlin Conference, which was chaired by Prince Bismarck of Germany. The Africans, to be honest with you, I agree with some intellectuals who have suggested on independence, they inherited a colonial vehicle, and all they did was simply change the drivers. But in fact, what is needed is for Africa to come up with a vehicle that is a reflection of African values, African mores, African culture, so that we can begin driving in the direction that has the potential to benefit our people.
You raised some very important points there, but how about people who say despite Africans coming together, a lot of challenges remain? For example, the red tape, the poor infrastructure across the continent. Then there are countries that they want to protect their own. They don't want competition from their neighbors. You have a lot of challenges that could lead to maybe this block not working as it's supposed to be.
I see their concern, but let's face it. It is not like we are in a business or at a time where we are required to invent the wheel. The wheel has already been invented. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. What we need to do is to borrow some lessons from some other human experiences. We have looked at, for example, a country like China. When you think about a country like China, Ndugu, you look at its population and the population of the African continent, they seem to be on the same page. You're talking about in the neighborhood of 1.3 billion people. But when you look at the development of China, because it is a one nation state, it is a country that has a one leadership. It has been able to develop to such an extent that has lifted tens of millions of its own people from poverty and is going ahead. As a matter of fact, as we talk, it occupies the second largest economy in the world. And yet here in Africa, with pretty much the same population, we are with probably more natural resources than China. Because in fact, China has developed by climbing on Africa's shoulders. China develops on African minerals, for example. China develops on African oil. Why can't Africa mobilize and harness its wealth? Why can't Africa unite and become a one nation powerful state that is capable of making sure that her wealth is for the benefit of its own people? I think it can be done.
You could not have put that in a better way. Obviously, the trade agreement covers a market consisting of about 1.2 billion people, a combined GDP of 3 trillion. That's a huge sum of money if Africans were to work together. But again, there's still some hurdles. When you think about a country like Eritrea, Eritrea has refused to be part of this bloc. So how are they going to maybe benefit from this kind of trade that we are talking about?
It is very unfortunate that they have not been able to come on board. Initially, the argument was that they probably couldn't do it because they were at war with Ethiopia. But now that you have peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea, especially following the peace essentially brought about by the mediation of the incumbent Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, I think they should reconsider. But the other point, by the way, is that you also have, for some reason, 54 countries. But by 54 countries, by the way, we are talking about the inclusion of Western Sahara, which is not yet a legitimate nation state, but a member of the African Union. Because Morocco, when it comes to Western Sahara, has other ideas. Couldn't that cause a problem?
I think you're absolutely right. There is also the issue of movement across borders. It's going to make it easy for this intra-trade, but chances are that the movement of goods from one place to another, that's also going to be a challenge. Take, for example, if you wanted to travel across Africa, it's probably easier for you to go to Europe and go to Africa than connecting from Africa. So doesn't that also pose a serious challenge?
You could not have a direct flight from East Africa in a British protectorate or colony to a West African French territory. Because after all, the French used to say that for them, they did not really colonize Africa. They basically looked at African territories as overseas territories, which were, in their view, integral parts of the metropolitan France. But now, you don't have to do that really. There are so many connections between the continents. So yes, that will be a challenge. Infrastructure will be a challenge. But guess what? That perhaps will also be a great opportunity for Africa to solve that challenge. Actually, when you think about it, I don't know why we are not able to do that up to now, because I remember reading a very interesting book on globalization by a gentleman called Joseph Stiglitz. He is a professor of economics and business at Columbia University in New York City. This Professor Stiglitz is a recipient of a Nobel laureate in economics. He's also a former chief economist of the World Bank. This man, in his book, talks about how the intellectual balance of power has actually been shifting in the favor of Africa and Africans. And he has a point. But that's not the issue right now as we talk. There are so many universities now, except that it seems to me that what we have ended up doing is actually getting more on the quantity and probably less on the quality. What we really need is both. We need both quality and quantity.
How about ordinary folks? There are people who are like wondering what's this Africa free trade bloc all about. They don't understand it. How can ordinary people take advantage of this amazing opportunity?
I think that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement needs to learn lessons from some of these other continental institutions that have been in place and have honestly not succeeded in making their presence known on the ground by the people whose taxes support them. I think we need to get into the business of educating the public in the sense that we can take the institution to the people so that the institution gets the blessings from the people. I think that we need these institutions to sell themselves to the people who support them through their taxes. That's what it will take. There needs to be a lot of what you would call civics education. Even the governments in Africa do not seem to care to conduct civics lessons so that their own people can even in fact know the relationship. And I'm talking about the basic relationship of these individuals in African countries with this thing called the state or the government.
Shaka, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I think I will end there. Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome, Ndugu, anytime.